The last thought you have before you fall asleep doesn't disappear. It stays. While you sleep, your mind doesn't shut down. It processes, it organizes, it consolidates. And the material it uses to do all of that is exactly what you fed it in the final hours before you closed your eyes. 99% of people throw this moment away. They come home drained, grab their phone, scroll for 40 minutes, watch whatever shows up on the screen, and fall asleep with a head full of bad news, comparison, stress, and noise. Then they wake up the next day feeling heavy. No energy, no direction. And they can't figure out why. It's not physical exhaustion, it's mental contamination. What you put into your mind after 9 p.m. determines who you'll be at 6 a.m. the next morning. It determines whether you wake up in construction mode or survival mode, whether the day begins as a choice or as a reaction. There's a window, narrow, silent, powerful, the hours between the end of the day and the beginning of sleep. And the people who master that window aren't smarter than you. They don't have more discipline than you were born capable of. They simply discovered something nobody teaches. The night isn't the end of the day. It's the foundation of the next one. And if you don't build that foundation on purpose, your mind will build it anyway, using fear, using regret, using everything that went unprocessed during the day. Marcus Aurelius said, "The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your thoughts." But nobody tells you that the most dangerous thoughts are the ones that slip in when your guard is down. And your guard is never lower than in the hours before sleep. Your brain after 9 p.m. enters a state called hypnagogic transition, a bridge between full wakefulness and sleep. In that state, you are extraordinarily suggestible, extraordinarily receptive. What you absorb there doesn't just enter your mind, it installs itself. The 1% know this, and they use that window like a weapon, not to work more, not to be more productive, but to program the mind with intention, to choose the thoughts that will ferment overnight and emerge transformed by morning. While the majority uses this time to quietly destroy themselves, the elite uses it to quietly rebuild. Today I'm going to show you the 7 habits they practice after 9 p.m. They're not complicated, they don't require equipment, they don't require you to be a different person. They require you to decide that what happens inside your head at night matters. If you're ready to stop wasting your most powerful window, type this in the comments right now. I own my night. Habit 1. They close the day before the day closes them. There's a massive difference between the day ending and you closing the day. Most of the time, what happens is the day simply stops. Work ends because the shift ended. Tasks stop because the energy ran out. Obligations pause because the clock said to pause. But the mind didn't stop. It keeps running the same open files that never got resolved. The conversation that still hasn't happened. The decision you pushed off. The problem you didn't solve. All of it keeps consuming mental RAM while you're trying to rest. The 1% don't let the day end passively. They close the day with intention. That means doing one simple but powerful thing, a mental closing ritual. Not a to-do list for tomorrow. Not a critical review of everything that went wrong. A closure. A deliberate act of telling your mind, this chapter is done. Epictetus said, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Or the closing of the day is the moment of acceptance. In practice, this can be as simple as grabbing a piece of paper and writing down 3 things. What you did today, what you learned, and what can wait until tomorrow. Not to be productive, to create a psychological barrier between the day that passed and the night that's beginning. Without that closing, you carry the entire day to bed with you, and carrying the day to bed is the mental equivalent of sleeping in your work clothes. You don't rest, You just pause. Winners close the day with the same intention they started it. They create a boundary, a moment of transition, a clear signal to the mind that operation mode is over and restoration mode begins. When you do this, your mind stops trying to solve problems while you sleep and starts consolidating what actually matters. Habit 2. They don't feed their mind what weakens it. Everything you consume after 9 p.m. is literally the last meal your mind receives before processing it through the entire night. Think about that. If you eat a heavy, greasy, sugar-loaded meal right before bed, your body spends energy digesting instead of recovering. You wake up destroyed, even after 8 hours of sleep. The exact same thing happens with your mind. If you feed your mind conflict-driven content, negative news, social media comparison, content that triggers anxiety or anger, your mind spends the night processing conflict, processing negativity, processing threats, and you wake up destroyed even after 8 hours of sleep. Most people know this vaguely, but keep doing it anyway. Why? Because the most addictive content is exactly the most destructive. The algorithm knows this. It was built that way. Seneca said, "Be selective about the company you keep, for you will absorb their habits and their thoughts." That applies to content just as much as it applies to people. The 1% have one clear rule. After 9 p.m., the diet changes. Not necessarily zero screens, not necessarily total silence, but intentional content, content that nourishes instead of contaminates, a book that expands their perspective, a podcast that installs useful thoughts, a real conversation with someone they love, or simply silence, which is also a form of mental nourishment. What they cut is what weakens them. The endless, mindless scroll, content that triggers comparison, repetitive news cycles that create a constant sense of threat, not to isolate themselves from the world, to protect the window, because what enters last before sleep doesn't just stay. It grows. Your sleeping mind amplifies what it received. Fearful thoughts get heavier. Powerful thoughts get more solid. You decide which one gets amplified. Habit 3. They slow their brain down before it forces them to stop. The biggest mistake people make at night is assuming the brain will naturally slow down once the body lies down. It won't. A brain that spent the entire day running at full speed doesn't know how to stop. It keeps going, keeps planning, worrying, replaying, anticipating, and when you finally close your eyes, it's still in high gear. Result: you're lying down, but you're not resting. Your eyes are closed, but your mind is still at work. That state that looks like sleep but isn't real sleep robs you of your recovery quality. The 1% don't wait for the brain to slow down on its own. They slow the brain down on purpose. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." And slowing the brain down is the most direct exercise of that power. In practice, this means creating a deliberate transition, a set of actions that signal to the nervous system it's time to shift gears. It could be slow, controlled breathing, a 5-minute guided meditation, writing down 3 thoughts you want to release before sleep, instrumental music without lyrics, which activates slower brainwaves without stimulating language processing. What doesn't work is trying to force sleep. The harder you force it, the more the brain resists, because forcing is an active effort, and active effort keeps the mind awake. The winner's technique isn't to force sleep. It's to create the conditions for it. They reduce stimulation gradually, not cutting everything at once because the contrast is too sharp. They create a descent ramp, dimmer screen, lower volume, more passive activity, slower breathing. The nervous system responds to gradients. When the transition is smooth, it cooperates. When you start practicing this, you discover something that feels impossible. that you can fall asleep without a battle, without tossing and turning for 40 minutes, without the mind racing before it finally shuts off because you didn't give it the chance to race. You'd already slowed down. Habit 4. They resolve what they can and release what they can't. There's a specific kind of weight people carry to bed every night. It's not tiredness. It's not worry about something concrete. It's that diffuse feeling of incompleteness, that something is unresolved, hovering, something that needs thinking, but you haven't thought about, something that needs a decision, but you haven't decided. Your mind hates incompleteness. In psychology, there's a phenomenon called the Zeigarnik effect, the mind's tendency to fixate on unfinished tasks, on open loops. It keeps returning to what wasn't closed because it was biologically programmed to seek completion. The problem is that at night, when you have little energy and little clarity, trying to resolve those open loops doesn't work. You spin in circles. You think about the same thing from different angles without getting anywhere, and still can't let go. The 1% learn to make a distinction that changes everything. They separate what can be resolved right now from what can't. What can be resolved right now, they resolve. A simple decision, a short reply, a 5-minute action that closes the loop and frees the mind. What can't be resolved right now, they record and deliberately release, writing on paper or in an app. This is saved. I'll handle it tomorrow. It might sound too simple, but that action communicates to the mind that the information won't be lost, that it doesn't need to keep holding the file open, that it can safely let go. Epictetus said, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish. Wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well." That philosophy applied to nighttime means accepting that some problems don't need to be solved before sleep. They need to be stored with intention. The mind that releases sleeps. The mind that holds on battles. Winners release with method, not with willpower. Habit 5. They program their identity before they program their alarm. Most people, before bed, set their alarm. The 1% set their identity. There's a radical difference between falling asleep thinking, "I need to wake up early tomorrow," and falling asleep thinking, "I'm the kind of person who builds the day before the world wakes up." The first is an instruction. The second is an identity. And identity goes infinitely deeper than instruction. Your brain during sleep doesn't just consolidate memories, it consolidates narratives. It takes the thought patterns that were active before you fell asleep and reinforces them, makes them more automatic, more natural, more you. If the last active pattern was, "I'm exhausted, I have no energy, the day was brutal," that's what gets more solid. If the last active pattern was, "I'm someone who grows, who moves forward, who chooses," that's what gets more solid. Seneca said, "Treat your soul as something greater than the body." And taking care of the soul at night means being intentional about which version of yourself you activate before sleep. In practice, winners do something that sounds almost too simple. Before falling asleep, they spend 60 seconds affirming who they are, not what they want, not what they need to do, who they are. "I am disciplined. I am focused. I am someone who delivers. I am capable of handling whatever comes tomorrow." Not said mechanically, felt, connected to the sensation in the body. Because the emotional state you sleep in is the emotional state your mind consolidates. This isn't surface-level positive thinking. It's applied neuroscience. It's using the period of highest mental plasticity right before sleep to intentionally install the most powerful version of who you're building. When you do this consistently, something shifts. You start waking up different, not just more rested, more whole, more aligned with who you want to be, because your mind spent the night consolidating exactly that. Habit 6. They practice gratitude as protection, not politeness. Gratitude is usually sold as a virtue, something beautiful, noble, spiritually elevated. The 1% use gratitude as strategy. There's a powerful neurological reason for this. When you genuinely activate a state of gratitude, your brain releases dopamine and serotonin. Two neurotransmitters that don't just make you feel better in the moment. They literally change the chemical environment in which your memory is consolidated during sleep. Memories consolidated in a dopamine and serotonin environment become more vivid, more accessible, more emotionally positive. Memories consolidated in a cortisol environment, the stress hormone, become heavier, more anxious, more colored by threat. The state you fall asleep in determines the flavor of the memories you wake up carrying. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." But he practiced this at night as well. His journals, written before sleep, are full of recognition of what worked, what was enough, what mattered. Most people do the opposite. Before sleep, they mentally replay what went wrong, what they didn't do, what they don't have yet, what they lost, and they sleep marinating in that frequency. The 1% break that cycle, not with forced or fake gratitude, with specific, real gratitude. Not "I'm grateful for life" in a generic way. But today, this specific conversation happened and it mattered. This moment existed and it was real. This progress was small, but it was real, specific, concrete, irrefutable. Your mind cannot argue against the concrete, and when it stops arguing, it relaxes. When it relaxes, it truly rests. Gratitude before sleep isn't emotional softness. It's the most strategic way to prepare the ground for rest and growth. Habit 7. They treat 10 p.m. like a psychological deadline. Deadlines create urgency. Urgency creates focus. Focus creates results. The 1% understand this not just at work. They understand it in sleep. They don't treat bedtime as something vague. Not "I'll sleep when I feel tired" or "I'll go to bed earlier when life allows it." They have a deadline, a specific time that functions as a hard boundary. After that time, the window closes. Before that time, they make sure everything that needs to happen mentally has happened. This deadline serves two opposite and equally powerful functions. First, it creates urgency to complete the nightly rituals. When you know you have until 10 p.m. to close the day, filter the mind, slow the brain, release the open loops, program the identity, practice gratitude, you don't procrastinate, you move, because the window is real. Second, it creates protection against the "just a little more" trap. Just one more episode, just one more scroll, just one more thought about tomorrow's problem. The deadline eliminates negotiation. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And being master of yourself at night means refusing to be hijacked by the infinite "just a little more." Most people don't have this deadline. They sleep when exhaustion wins, which might be midnight, 1 in the morning, whatever comes first. And because there's no structure, there's no ritual. And because there's no ritual, there's no preparation. And because there's no preparation, the morning starts right where the night left off. With the chaos still running, winners create the boundary. That boundary is sacred, not because they're rigid, because they understood that sleeping well isn't a consequence of the day. It's a decision made in advance. When the deadline arrives, you're not trying to sleep. You already built the conditions for sleep. You closed the day. You controlled your mental diet. You slowed your brain down. You released the loops. You programmed your identity. You activated gratitude. You're ready. And that readiness isn't luck. It was built, habit by habit, night by night. While most people arrive at sleep through exhaustion, you arrive through choice. That difference seems small in a single night. Over months, it's the difference between a life that's built and a life that just happens. The 1% don't win their days in the morning. They win them at night. While the majority wastes the last conscious hours quietly destroying themselves, The elite uses every minute of those hours to quietly build. They close the day with intention before the day closes them. They control what feeds the mind because they know the last meal is the most powerful one. They slow the brain down before it forces them to stop. They release what can't be resolved without guilt, with method. They program who they'll be tomorrow before they program the alarm. They practice gratitude not as politeness, but as chemical protection for their sleep. And they treat their bedtime as a deadline that doesn't get negotiated. They don't do this because they're too disciplined to allow themselves to rest. They do this because they understood that resting well is the most advanced form of performance, that the night isn't the end, it's the preparation. And preparation is everything. You have this blueprint now. You know what they do. You know why it works. The only question is, what are you going to do with this window tonight? If this gave you something real, hit that like button. Drop a comment. I build my night. Share this with someone who's still wasting these hours without realizing it. And if you want to keep building this mindset, subscribe to this channel, because we're just getting started. Go. Your window tonight starts now.